On Dragonstone, Queen Rhaenyra collapsed when told of Luke's death. Luke's younger brother Joffrey swore a terrible oath of vengeance against Prince Aemon and Lord Boros. Only the intervention of the Sea Snake and the Princess Rhaenys kept the boy from mounting his own dragon at once. Mushroom would have us believe he also played a part in this as well. Whatever the case, as the Black Council considered how to strike back, a raven arrived from Harrenhal. An eye for an eye, a son for a son, Prince Daemon wrote. Lucerys shall be avenged. It should not be forgotten, in his youth, Prince Daemon Targaryen had been the prince of the city, his face and laughter familiar to every cup purse, whore, and gambler in Fleabottom. The prince still had friends in the low places of King's Landing as well, and followers among the Goldcloaks. But notice to King Aegon, the Hand, or the Dowager Queen, he also had alliances on the court as well, even on the Green Council. To this pale stranger he reached out, by secret ways to set a terrible vengeance into motion. Amidst the stews of Fleabottom, Prince Daemon's go-between found suitable instruments. One had been a sergeant in a city watch. Big and brutal, he lost his gold cloak while beating a whore to death while in a drunken rage. The other was a rat catcher in the Red Keep. Their true names are lost to history. We remember them only as Blood and Cheese. It was said that Cheese knew the Red Keep better than the shape of his own cock. At least Mushroom tells us. The hidden doors and secret tunnels that Maegor the Cruel had built were as familiar to the Ratcatcher as the rats he haunted. Using a forgotten passageway, Cheese led Blood into the heart of the castle, unseen by any guard. Some say the quarry was the king himself, but Aegon was accompanied by the King's Guard wherever he went. And even Cheese knew of no way out of Maegor's holdfast, save over the drawbridge that spanned the dry moat and its unformidable iron spikes. The Tower of the Hand had been less secure. The two men crept through the walls, bypassing the spearmen posted at the tower doors. Sir Otto's rooms were of no interest to them. Instead, they slipped into his daughter's chambers, one floor below. The Queen Alicent had taken up residence there after the death of King Viserys, when her son Aegon moved into Maegor's holdfast with his own queen. Once inside, Cheese bound and gagged the Dowager Queen Alicent, while Blood strangled her bedmaid. And then they settled down to wait. For they knew it was the custom of the Queen Helaena to bring her children to see their grandmother every evening before bed. Blind to her dangers, Queen Helaena appeared as dusk was settling over the castle. Accompanied by her 3 children, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera were 6, and Maelor 2. As they entered the apartments, Helaena was holding his little hand and calling out her mother's name. Blood barred the door and slew the Queen's guardmen, while Cheese appeared to snatch up Maelor. "Scream and you will die," Blood told her grace. Queen Helaena kept calm, it is said. "Who are you?" she demanded of the two. "Debt collectors," said Cheese. "An eye for an eye, a son for a son. We only want the one to square things. Won't hold the rest of you fine folks. Not one little hair. Which one you want to lose, your grace?" Once she realized what he meant, Queen Helaena played the men to kill her instead. "A wife's not a son," said Blood. "It has to be a boy." Cheese warned the queen to make a choice soon, before Blood grew bored and would rape her little girl. "Pick," he said, "or we will kill them all." On her knees weeping, Helaena named the youngest Maelor. Perhaps she thought the boy was too young to understand, or perhaps it was because the older boy, Jaehaerys, was King Aegon's firstborn son and heir. "You hear that, little boy?" Cheese whispered to Maelor. "Your mama wants you dead." Then he gave Blood a grin, and the hulking swordsman slew the Prince Jaehaerys, striking off the boy's head with a single blow. Strange to say, the Ratcatcher and the Butcher were true to their word. They did no further harm to Queen Helaena or her surviving children, but rather fled with the prince's head in hand. A hue and cry went up, but Cheese knew the secret passageways as the guards did not, and the killers made their escape. However, 2 days later, Blood was seized at the Gate of the Gods, trying to leave King's Landing with the head of the Prince Jaehaerys, hidden in one of his saddle sacks. Under torture, he confessed he had been taking it to Harrenhal to collect his reward from Prince Daemon. He also gave a description of the whore he claimed that hired them. An older woman, foreign by talk, cloaked and hooded, and very pale. We know her as the Lady Misery. After 13 days of torment, Blood would at last be allowed to die. Queen Alicent had commanded Larys the Clubfoot to learn his true name, so that he might bathe in the blood of his wife and children. But our sources don't say if this ever occurred. Sir Luth the Largent in his gold cloak searched the Street of Silk from top to bottom and turned out and stripped every harlot in King's Landing, but no trace of Cheese or the White Worm were ever found. In his grief and fury, King Aegon II commanded that all the city's ratcatchers be taken out and hanged, and this was done. The king's grandfather, Sir Otto Hightower, brought in 100 cats in the replacement of the ratcatchers. Though Blood and Cheese had spared her life, the Queen Helaena cannot be said to have survived that fateful dusk. Afterwards, she would not eat, nor bathe, nor leave her chambers, and she could no longer stand to look upon her son Maelor, knowing she had named him to die. The king had no recourse but to take the boy and give him to their mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, to raise as if he were her own. Thereafter, Aegon and his wife, the Queen Helaena, slept separately. While Queen Helaena sunk deeper and deeper into madness, his grace would rage and drink and rage. The Red Dragon and the Gold. The Dance of the Dragons entered a new stage after the death of Lucerys Velaryon in the Stormlands and the murder of Prince Jaehaerys before his mother's eyes in the Red Keep. For both the Blacks and the Greens, blood called to blood for vengeance. And all across the realm, lords called their banners and armies, and gathered and began to march. In the Riverlands, raiders of Raventree, flying Rhaenyra's banners, crossed into the lands of House Bracken, burning crops, driving off sheep and cattle, sacking villages, and despoiling every sept they came upon. Initially, both claimants to the Iron Throne flew the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen, red on black, but by the end of 129 AC, both Aegon and Rhaenyra had introduced variations to distinguish their own supporters from their foes. The king changed the color of his dragon from red to gold, to celebrate the brilliant golden scales of his dragon Sunfire, whilst the Queen Rhaenyra quartered the Targaryen arms with those of House Arryn and House Velaryon, in honor of her late lady mother and her first husband, respectively. When House Bracken gathered a strong force to strike back, Lord Samwell Blackwood surprised them on the march, taking them unawares as they camped beneath the riverside mill. In the fight that followed, the mill was put to the torch and men fought and died for hours, bathed in the red light of flames. Sir Amos Bracken, leading the host from the Stonehenge, cut down and slew Lord Blackwood in single combat, only to perish himself when a weirwood arrow found his eye slit of his helm and drove deep into his skull. Supposedly that shaft was loosed by Lord Blackwood's 16-year-old sister Alysanne, who would later be known as Black Aly, but whether this is fact or merely family legend, we do not know. Many other grievous losses were suffered by both sides in what became known as the Battle of the Burning Mill. When the Brackens finally broke and fled back into their own lands, under the command of Sir Amos's bastard half-brother, Sir Raylan Rivers, it was only to find that Stonehenge had been taken in their absence, led by Prince Daemon on the back of Caraxes. A strong host made up of Daries, Roots, Pipers, and Freys had captured the castle by storm in the absence of so much of House Bracken's strength. Lord Humphrey Bracken and his remaining children had been held captive, along with his third wife and baseborn paramour. Rather than see them harmed, Sir Raylan yielded. With House Bracken thus broken and defeated, the last of King Aegon's supporters in the Riverlands lost heart and laid down their swords as well. Yet the Green Council was not sitting idle. Sir Otto Hightower had been busy as well, winning over lords and hiring swords and strengthening defense of King's Landing, and assiduously seeking other alliances. After the rejection of Grand Maester Orwell's peace overtures, the Hand redoubled in his efforts, dispatching the ravens to Winterfell, the Eyrie, Riverrun, White Harbor, Goldtown, Bitterbridge, Raven Owl, and half 100 other castles and keeps. Riders galloped through the night to holdings closer to hand, to summon their lords and ladies to court to do fealty to King Aegon. Sir Otto also reached out to Dorne, whose ruling prince, Corn Martell, had once warred against Prince Daemon in the Stepstones, but Prince Corn spurned his offer. Dorne has danced with dragons before, he said. I would sooner sleep with scorpions. And at this, Sir Otto was losing the trust of his grandson, the king, who mistook his efforts for inaction and his caution for cowardness. Septon Eustace tells us of an occasion when Aegon entered the Tower of the Hand and found his grandfather writing another letter, whereupon he knocked the ink pen into his grandsire's lap, declaring, "Thrones are won with swords, not quills. Spilled blood, not ink." Surprisingly, the fall of Harrenhal to Prince Daemon came as a great shock to his grace, at least Monken tells us. Until that moment, Aegon II had believed his half-sister's cause to be hopeless. Harrenhal left his grace feeling vulnerable for the first time. The subsequent defeats at the Burning Mill and Stonehenge came as further blows and made the king realize that his situation was much more perilous than it once seemed. These fears deepened when ravens returned from the Reach, where the Greens believed themselves strongest. House Hightower and Oldtown were solidly behind King Aegon, and his grace had the harbor as well. But elsewhere in the south, other lords were declaring for Rhaenyra. Amongst them, Lord Costane of Three Towers, Lord Mullingdor of Uplands, Lord Tarley of Hornhill, Lord Roaring of Goldengrove, and the Lord Grim of Greyshield. However, amongst those traitors were Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Lyman's heir, who was demanding the release of his grandsire from the dungeons, where most believed the former Maester of Coin to be confined. However, the likelihood of that is zero. As we know, Sir Lyman Beesbury was murdered by Sir Criston Cole during the Green Council. His Grace received more bad news when Lord Tyrell of Highgarden, acting as regent for his young relative, a boy, suddenly thought better of their support of him and declared that Hyce Tyrell would take no part in the struggle. King Aegon began to drown in strong wine, Septon Eustace tells us. Sir Otto sent word to his nephew, Sir Armen Hightower, beseeching him to use his power of Oldtown to put down the rash rebellions in the Reach. Other blows followed. The Vale, White Harbor, and Winterfell, the Blackwoods, and other river lords streamed towards Harrenhal and Prince Daemon's banners. The Sea Snake's fleet closed Blackwater Bay, and every morning King Aegon had merchants whining at him. His Grace had no answer for their complaints, however, beyond another strong cup of wine. Do something, he demanded of Sir Otto, his grandsire. The Hand assured him that something was being done. He had hatched a plan to break the Velaryon blockade. A chief pillar of support for Queen Rhaenyra was her consort, yet Prince Daemon also presented to be one of her greatest weaknesses. Reached across the narrow sea to another of the prince's enemies, the Kingdom of the Three Daughters. The Triarchy was never quick to move, however. Lacking a true king, the important decisions in this three-headed kingdom were decided with the High Council. 11 magisters from each city made up the membership, every man of them intent on demonstrating his own power and shrewdness and importance, and winning every possible advantage for his own city. Even issues as timely as war, and peace, and alliance were subject to endless debate, and the High Council was not even in session when Sir Otto's envoys arrived. The delay did not sit well with the young king. Aegon II had run short with patience with his grandfather's prevarications. Though his mother, the Dowager Queen, spoke up for Sir Otto's defense, his Grace turned a deaf ear to her pleading. Summoning Sir Otto to the throne room, he tore the chain of office from his neck and tossed it to Sir Criston Cole. "My new hand is an iron fist," he boasted. "We're done with writing letters," he finished. Sir Criston Cole wasted no time proving his mantle. "It is not for you to plead for the support of lords like a beggar pleading for alms," he told Aegon. "You are the lawful king of Westeros, and those who defy are traitors. It is past time they learn the price of treachery. The first to pay that price will be the lord's captive, languishing under the Red Keep, men who had once sworn to defend the rights of Princess Rhaenyra, and still stubbornly refused to bend a knee to King Aegon. One by one they were dragged out into the castle ward, where the king's justice awaited them with axe. Each man was given a final chance to swear fealty to his Grace. Only Lord Butterwell, Lord Stolkworth, and Lord Rosby chose to do so. The Lords Hayford, Lord Merryweather, Lord Hart, Lord Buckler, Lord Caswell, and the Lady Fell valued their sworn words more than their lives, and each were beheaded in turn, along with 8 landed knights and 20 servants and retainers. Their heads were mounted on spikes above the city's gates, for all to witness the price of treason. His Grace also desired to avenge the murder of his heir by blood and cheese, by means of an attack on Dragonstone, descending on the island citadel on Dragonback to seize or slay his half-sister and her bastard sons. It took all of the Green Council to dissuade him. The king's new hand, Sir Criston Cole, urged a different course. The pretended princess had made the use of stealth and treachery to kill the Prince Jaehaerys, Cole said, so let us do the same. We will pay the princess back in her own bloody coin, he told the king. The instrument the Lord Commander chose for the king's vengeance was his sworn brother, Sir Arryk Corgal. Sir Arryk was intimately familiar with the ancient seat of House Targaryen, having visited there often during the reign of King Viserys. And Sir Arryk and his brother Sir Eric were identical twins in all respects. Not even their fellow Kingsguard could tell them apart, both Mushroom and Septon Eustace assert. Once clad in white, Sir Arryk could be able to move freely about Dragonstone, Sir Criston suggested. Any guards who chanced to encounter him would surely mistake him for his brother. It was said that Sir Arryk did not undertake the mission happily. Instead, Septon Eustace tells us the troubled knight visited the Red Keep Sept on the night he was to sail, to pray for the forgiveness to our mother above. Yet, as Kingsguard, sworn to obey the king and commander, he had no choice in honor but to make his way to Dragonstone, clad in the salt-stained garb of a simple fisherman. Like so much other during the Dance of the Dragons, the purpose of Sir Arryk's mission remains a matter of contention. However, we have 3 tellings on the matter: Grand Maester Munkin, Mushroom, the Court Fool, and Septon Eustace. Our first account comes from Grand Maester Munkin. He tells us that Cargal had been commanded to slay Rhaenyra, putting an end to the rebellion at a single stroke, while its Mushroom insists that her sons were Cargal's prey, that Aegon II wished to wash out the blood of his murdered son with that of his bastard nephews Jacaerys and Joffrey Strong. So Arryk came ashore without hindrance, donned his armor and white cloak, and had no trouble gaining entrance to the castle in disguise of his twin brother, just as Criston Cole had planned. Deep in the heart of Dragonstone, however, as he was making his way to the royal apartments, the gods brought him face to face with Sir Eric himself, who knew at once what his brother's presence meant. The Singers tells us that Sir Eric said, "I love you, brother," as he unsheathed his blade, and Sir Ark replied, "And I love you, brother," as he drew his own. It's believed that the twins battled for the best part of an hour. The clash on steel woke half of the Queen's court, but the onlookers could only stand helplessly and watch, for no man there could tell the difference of which brother was which. In the end, Sir Ark and Sir Eric dealt each other's mortal wounds and died in each other's arms, with tears upon their cheeks.
Mushroom's account is shorter and nastier altogether. The fight lasted only moments, our fool says. There were no declarations of brotherly love, and each Cargyle denounced the other as a traitor before they clashed. Sir Eric, standing above his twin on the spiral step, struck the first mortal blow, a savage downward cut that nigh took his brother's storm arm off his shoulder. But as he collapsed, Sir Ark grasped the Slayer's white cloak and pulled him close enough to drive a dagger deep into his belly. Sir Ark was dead before the first guards arrived, but Sir Eric took 4 days to die of his gut wound, screaming in horrible pain and cursing his traitor brother all the while. For obvious reasons, singers and storytellers have shown a marked preference for the tale told by Monken. Maesters and other scholars alike must make their own determinations, as we shall, of which version was more likely the case. Now, all Septim Eustace tells us is that the Cargyle twins slew each other, and that's about it. We don't get much else from his account. Back in King's Landing, King Aegon II's Master of Whispers, Laird Strong, drew up a list of all the lords that attended Queen Rhaenyra's coronation and sat on her Black Council. The lords Celtigar and Velaryon had their seats on islands, and as Aegon II had no strength at sea, they were beyond his reach of wrath. But those Black lords whose lands were on the mainland Westerosi continent enjoyed no such protection. With 100 knights and 500 men at arms, augmented by 3 times as many sellswords, Sir Criston Cole marched on Rosby and Stokeworth, whose lords had only recently repented their allegiance to the Queen, commanding them to prove their loyalty by adding their power to his own. Thus augmented, Cole's hosts advanced upon the walled harbor town of Duskendale, where they took the defenders by surprise. The town was sacked, the ships in the harbor set afire, and Lord Darkland, their lord, beheaded. His household knights and garrison were given the choice between swearing their swords to King Aegon or sharing the same fate as their lord. Unsurprisingly, most chose the first option. Rook's Rest was Sir Criston's next objective. Forewarned of their commanding, Lord Stark closed his gates and defied the attackers. Behind his walls, his lordship could only watch as his fields and woods and villages were burned, and his sheep and cattle and small folk put to the sword. When provisions inside the castle began to run low, he dispatched a raven to Dragonstone, pleading for succor. That call for help arrived on Dragonstone as Rhaenyra and the Blacks were mourning Sir Eric and debating the proper response to Aegon the Usurper's latest attack. Most accounts still say that the Queen Rhaenyra was still reluctant, however, to strike back. Monken tells us it was because of her horror of becoming a kinslayer, while Septim Eustace claims that Rhaenyra had a mother's heart that made her reluctant to risk the lives of her remaining sons. However, Mushroom alone was present for the councils, so the court fool's version seems most likely. Mushroom tells us Rhaenyra was still grief-sick over the death of her son Lucerys, so much so that she removed herself from her war council and gave over their commands to the Sea Snake and his wife, the Princess Rhaenys. 9 days after Lord Staunton dispatched to plead for help, the sound of leathering wings was heard across the sea, and the dragon Meleys appeared above Rook's Rest. The Red Queen, she was called, for her scarlet scales that covered her. The membranes of her wings were pink, her chest, horns, and claws bright as copper, and on her back, in steel and copper armor that flashed in the sun, rode Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Sir Criston Cole was not dismayed. Aegon's hand had expected this, counted on it even. Drums beat out a command, and archers rushed forward, crossbowmen and longbowmen, both filling the air with arrows and quarrels. Scorpions were cranked upward to loose iron bolts on the sword that had once fell upon Meraxes and Dorne. Melee suffered a score hits, but the arrows only seemed to make her angry. She swept down, spitting fire left and right. Knights burned in their saddles as the hair and hide and harness of their horses went up in flames. Men at arms dropped their spears and scattered. Some tried to hide behind their shields, but neither iron nor oak could withstand dragon's breath. Sir Criston sat on his white horse, shouting, "Aim for the rider!" through the smoke and flames. Meleys roared, smoke swirling from her nostrils, a stallion kicking in her jaws as tongues of fire engulfed him. And then came an answering roar as 2 more dragons appeared above Rook's Rest. King Aegon astride Sunfire the Golden and his brother, Aemon, upon the monstrous Vhagar. Sir Criston had spun a trap, and Rhaenys had come snatching at the bait, and now teeth had closed around her. However, the Princess Rhaenys made no attempt to flee. With a glad cry In a crack of her whip, she turned melees towards the foe. Against Vhagar alone, she might have stood a chance, history tells us. But against Vhagar and Sunfire together, doom was almost certain. The dragons met violently, 1,000 feet above the field of battle, as balls of fires burst and blossomed, so bright that men swore later that the sky was full of suns. The crimson jaws of melees closed around Sunfire's golden neck for a moment, until the monstrous Vhagar fell upon them. All three beasts went spinning towards the ground. They struck the ground so hard that it was said that stones fell from the battlements of Rook's Rest half a league away. Those closest to the dragons did not live to tell the tale. Those further off could not see for the flame and smoke. It was hours before the fires cleared, but from the ashes, only Vhagar rose unharmed. Melees was dead, broken by the fall and ripped to pieces upon the ground. And Sunfire, the splendid golden beast, had one wing half torn from his body, whilst his royal rider had suffered broken ribs, a broken hip, and burns that covered half his body. His left arm was the worst, however. The dragon flame burned so hot that the king's armor had melted into his flesh. A body believed to be the Princess Rhaenys Targaryen was later found beside the carcass of her dragon, but it was so blackened that no one could be sure it was her. The beloved daughter of Lady Jocelyn Baratheon and Prince Aemon Targaryen, faithful wife to Lord Corlys Velaryon, mother and grandmother, the queen who never was, lived fearlessly and died amongst fire and blood. She was 55 years old. 800 knights and squires and common men lost their lives that day as well. Another 100 perished not long after when Prince Aemon and Sir Criston Cole took the Rook's Rest and put his garrison to death. Lord Staunton's head was carried back to King's Landing and mounted above the old gate. But it was the head of the dragon melees drawn through the city on a cart that awed the crowds of small folks into silence. Septon Eustace tells us that thousands left King's Landing afterwards, until the Dowager Queen Alicent ordered the city gates closed and barred. King Aegon II did not die, though the burns brought him so much pain that some say he prayed for death. Carried back to King's Landing in a closed litter to hide the extent of his injuries, his grace did not raise from his bed for the rest of the year. Septons prayed for him, maesters attended him with potions and milk of the poppy, but Aegon slept 9 out of every 10 hours, waking only long enough to take nourishment before he slept again. None was allowed to disturb his grace's rest, save for his mother and his hand, Sir Criston Cole. His wife, Helaena, never so much as made the attempt. So lost was Helaena in her own grief and madness. The king's dragon Sunfire was injured and too huge and heavy to move, remained in the fields beyond Rook's Rest, crawling through the ashes like some great golden worm. In the early days, he fed himself upon the burned carcasses of the slain. When those were gone, the men Sir Criston Cole had left behind to guard him brought him calves and sheep to feast upon. "You must rule the realm until your brother is strong enough to take the crown again," the king's hand told Prince Aemon. Nor did Sir Criston need to say it twice, writes Eustace. So Aemon One-Eyed Targaryen, the kinslayer, took up the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. "It looks better on me than it ever did on him," the prince proclaimed. Yet Aemon did not assume the title of king, but proclaimed himself protector of the realm and prince regent. Sir Criston Cole remained hand of the king as well. Meanwhile, the seeds Jaehaerys Velaryon had planted on his flight north had begun to bear fruit. The men were gathering at White Harbor, Winterfell, Barrowtown, Sisterton, Goldtown, and the Gates of the Moon. "Should the Northmen join their strength to the River Lords assembling at Harrenhal under your uncle Prince Daemon, even the strong walls of King's Landing may not be able to withstand them," Sir Criston Cole warned the Prince Regent. Things in the south were ominous as well. Obedient to his uncle's calls, Lord Ormond Hightower had issued forth from Old Town with 1,000 knights, 1,000 archers, 3,000 men at arms, and uncounted thousands of camp followers, sellswords, and free riders, only to find himself set upon by Sir Alan Beesbury and Sir Alan Tarley. Though commanding far fewer men, the two Allans harassed him day and night, raiding his camps, murdering his scouts, setting fires to his line of march. Further south, Lord Callstane had issued forth from the Three Towers to fall upon the Hightower's baggage train. Worse reports had reached his lordship, that a host equal in size to his own, descending on the manor, led by Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of the Golden Grove. Lord Ormond had therefore decided he could not proceed without support from King's Landing. "We have need of your dragons," he wrote. Supremely confident in his own prowess as a warrior and the might of his dragon Vhagar, Aemon was eager to take the battle to his foes. "The whore on Dragonstone is not the threat," he said. "No more than Rowan and those traitors in the Reach. The danger is my uncle. Once Daemon is dead, all those fools flying our sisters' banners will run back to their castles and trouble us no more." East of Blackwater Bay, Queen Rhaenyra was also faring badly. The death of her son Lucerys had been a crushing blow to a woman already broken by pregnancy, labor, and stillbirth. When word reached Dragonstone that Princess Rhaenys had fallen, angry words were exchanged between the Queen and Lord Velaryon, who blamed her for his wife's death. "It should have been you," the Sea Snake shouted at her grace. "Sultan sent to you. Yet you let my wife answer and forbade your sons to join her. For all the castle knew that the Prince Jace and Joff had been eager to fly with Princess Rhaenys to Rook's Rest with their own dragons. Mushroom claims he became the Queen's main counselor and was the primary source of which her grace came to for wisdom and compassion. Unbeknownst to all, it was the Jester who ruled them now. Now these are large claims for a small man, and the histories give them no credit. As well, her grace was far from alone. 4 living sons remained to her. My strength and my consolation, the Queen called them. Aegon the Younger and Viserys, Prince Daemon's sons, were 9 and 7, respectively. Prince Joffrey was but 11, but Jacaerys, Prince of Dragonstone, was on the cusp of his 15th name day. It was Jace who came to the fore now. Mindful of the promise he made to the Maiden of the Vale, he ordered the Prince Joffrey to fly to Goldtown with Jaraxxus. Munkin suggests that Jace's desire to keep his brother far away from the fighting was paramount. This does not sit well with Joffrey, however, who was determined to prove himself in battle. Only when being told that he was being sent to defend the Vale against King Aegon's dragons did the boy grudgingly consent to go. Rhaena, the 13-year-old daughter of Prince Daemon by Lena Velaryon, was chosen to accompany him. Known as Rhaena of Pentos for the city of her birth, she was no dragon rider. Her hatchling had died some years before, but she brought 3 dragon's eggs along with her to the Vale, where she prayed nightly for their hatching. Lady Rhaena's twin, Baela, remained on Dragonstone. Long betrothed to Prince Jacaerys, she refused to leave him, insisting that she would fight beside him on her own dragon. Though Moondancer was too small to bear her weight, though Baela also announced her intent to marry Jace at once. No wedding was ever held. Munkin says the prince did not wish to marry until the war was over, while his Mushroom claims Jacaerys was already married to Sarah Snow, the mysterious bastard girl from Winterfell. The Prince of Dragonstone also had to care for the safety of his half-brothers, Aegon the Younger and Viserys, aged 9 and 7. Their father, Prince Daemon, had many friends in the free city of Pentos during his visits there, so Jacaerys reached across the narrow sea to the prince of the city, who agreed to foster the boys until Rhaenyra had secured the Iron Throne. In the waning days of 129 AC, the young princes aborted the call, gay abandoned, Aegon with Stormcloud, Viserys clutching his egg, to set sail for Essos. The Sea Snake sent 7 of his warships with them as escort to see that they reached Pentos safely. Prince Jacaerys soon brought the Lord of the Tides back to the fold by naming him Hand of the Queen. Together, he and Lord Corlys began to plan the assault upon King's Landing. With Sunfire wounded in Rook's Rest and unable to fly, and Tessarion with Prince Daeron in Old Town, only 2 mature dragons remained to defend King's Landing. In Dreamfire's rider, Queen Helena spent her days in darkness, weeping, and surely could not be counted as a threat. That left only Vhagar. No living dragon could match Vhagar in size or ferocity. But Jace reasoned that if Vermax, Syrax, and Caraxes were to descend upon King's Landing, even that hoary old bitch would not be able to withstand them.
3 is more than 1,
The dwarf claims to have told the Prince of Dragonstone.
but 4 is more than 3, and 6 is more than 4. Even a fool knows that.
When Jace pointed out that Stormcloud had never been ridden, that Moondancer was but a hatchling, and Taraxis was far away in the Vale with Prince Joffrey, he demanded to know where Mushroom proposed to find more dragons. The dwarf tells us he'd laughed and said,
Under the sheets and in the wood piles, wherever you Targaryens spilled your silver seed.
The fool murmured. House Targaryen had ruled Dragonstone for more than 200 years, since Lord Aenor Targaryen first arrived from Valyria with his dragons. Though it had always been the custom to wed brother and sister, and cousin to cousin, young blood runs hot, and it was not unknown for men of the house to seek their pleasures among the daughters, and even the wives, of their subjects. The small folk who lived in the villages below the Dragon Mount, tillers of the land and fishers of the sea. Indeed, until the reign of King Jaehaerys, the ancient right to the first night had been invoked, perhaps more oft on Dragonstone than anywhere else in the 7 kingdoms. Though the good Queen Alysanne would surely be shocked to hear about this. Though the first night was greatly resented elsewhere, as Queen Alysanne had learned in her women's council, such feelings were muted upon Dragonstone, where Targaryens were rightly regarded as being closer to gods than the common man. Here, brides thus blessed upon their wedding nights were envied, and their children born of such unions were esteemed above all others. For the lords of the Dragonstone ought celebrated the birth as such with lavish gifts of gold and silver and land to the mother. These happy bastards were said to have been born of dragon seed, and in time became only known as seeds. Even after the end of the rite of the first night, certain Targaryens continued to dally with the dragons in the innkeeps and the wives of the fishermen, so seeds and the sons of seeds were plentiful on Dragonstone. It was to them that Prince Jacaerys turned, at the urging of the fool, vowing that any man who could master a dragon will be granted lands and riches and dubbed the Knight. His sons will be ennobled, his daughters wed to lords, and he himself will have the honor of fighting beside the Prince of Dragonstone against the pretender Aegon II Targaryen and his treacherous supporters. Not all of those who came forward to answer the prince's call were seeds, nor even the sons or grandsons of seeds. A score of the queen's own household knights offered themselves as dragon riders, amongst them the Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard, Sir Stephen Darkland, along with the squires, scullins, sailors, and men-at-arms, mummers, and 2 maids. The sowing of the seeds, Monkkin names to try at some tragedies that followed. Others prefer the name of the Red Sowing. Dragons are not horses. They do not easily accept men upon their backs, and when angered or threatened, they attack. Monkkin's True Talent tells us that 16 men lost their lives during the sowing. 3 times that number was burned or maimed. Stephen Darkland was burned to death while trying to mount the dragon Seasmoke. Lord Gorman Maisley suffered the same fate when approaching Vermithor. A man called Silver Danes, whose hair and eyes lit credence to be a descendant from a bastard son of Maegor the Cruel, had an arm torn off him from Sheepstealer. As his son struggled to stomp the wound, the cannibal descended upon them, drove off Sheepstealer, and devoured father and son alike. Yet Seasmoke, Vermithor, and Silverwing were accustomed to men and tolerant of their presence. Having once been ridden, they were more accustomed of accepting new riders. Vermithor, the old king's own dragon, bent his neck to a blacksmith's bastard, a towering man called Hugh the Hammer, or Hard Hugh, whilst a pale-haired man-at-arms named Ulf the White, or Ulf the Sot, mounted Silverwing, the beloved dragon of the good Queen Alysanne. And Seasmoke, who had once bore Lena Velaryon, took into his back a boy of 15 known as Adam of Hull, whose origins remain a matter of dispute among historians. Adam and his brother Alan, 1 year younger, had been born to a woman named Marilda, the pretty young daughter of a shipwright. A familiar sight about her father's shipyards, the girl was better known as Mouse, for she was small and quick and always underfoot. She was still 16 when she gave birth to Adam in 114 AC, and barely 18 when Alan followed in 115. Small and quick as their mother, the bastards of Hull were born of silver hair and purple of eye, and soon proved to have the sea salt in their blood, growing up in their grandsire's shipyards and going to sea as shipboys before the age of 8. When Adam was 10 and Alan 9, their mother inherited the yards upon them. Adam and Alan were dragon seeds. No man who looked upon them could doubt, though their mother steadfastly refused to name their father. Only when Prince Jacaerys put out the call for new dragon riders did she claim that both boys were natural-born sons of the late Sir Laenor Velaryon. It is true, Sir Laenor had been known to visit the shipyard in Hull from time to time. Nonetheless, many on Dragonsong and Driftmark were skeptical, for Laenor Velaryon's disinterest in women was well remembered. None dare name her a liar, however, for it was Laenor's own father, Lord Corlys himself, brought the boys to Prince Jacaerys for a sowing. Having outlived all of his children, and suffered the betrayal of his nephews and cousins, the Seasake seemed more eager to accept these newfound grandsons, and when Adam of Hull mounted Sir Laenor's dragon Seasmoke, it seemed to prove the truth of his mother's claims. It should not surprise us, therefore, that Grand Maester Monkkin and Septim Eustace both dutifully assert Sir Laenor's parentage. But Mushroom, as ever, dissents. In his testimony, the fool puts forth the notion that the little mice had been sired not by the Sea Snake's son, but by the Sea Snake himself. Lord Corlys did not share Sir Laenor's erotic predispositions, he points out, and the whole shipyards were like unto a second home to him, where his son's visits were less frequently. Princess Rhaenys was said to have a fiery temperament like many Targaryens, at least Mushroom says, and she would not have taken kindly to hear her lord husband fathering bastards on a girl half her age, and a shipwright's daughter besides. Therefore, his lordship had prudently ended his shipyard's trowess with Mouse after Alan's birth, commanding her to keep the boys far from court. Only after the death of Princess Rhaenys did Lord Corlys at last feel able to bring the bastards safely forward. In this instance, it must be said that the tale told by the fool seems more likely than the versions offered by the Septim or Maester. Many and more at Queen Rhaenyra's court must surely have suspected the same. If so, they held their tongues. Not long after Adam of Hull had proved himself by flying Seasmoke, Lord Corlys went so far as to petition Queen Rhaenyra to remove the taint of bastardry from him and his brother. When Prince Jacaerys added his voice to the request, the queen complied. Adam of Hull, dragon seed and bastard, became Adam Velaryon, heir to Driftmark. Yet that did not write an end to the Red Sowing. More and worse was yet to come, with dire consequences for the Seven Kingdoms. Dragonstone's 3 wild dragons were less easily claimed than those that had previously known riders, yet attempts were made upon them all the same. Sheepstealer, a notably ugly mud-brown dragon, hatched when the old king was still young, had a taste for mutton, swooping down on a sheep herd's flock from Driftmark to the Windwater. He seldom harmed the ship herds, unless they attempted to intervene with him, but had been known to devour the occasional sheepdog. Grey Ghost dwelt in a smoking vent high on the eastern side of the Dragon Mount, preferred fish, and was most odd glimpsed flying over the narrow sea
snatching prey from the waters. A pale gray-white beast, the color of the morning mist, he was a notably shy dragon who avoided men and their works for years at a time. The largest and oldest of the wild dragons was the cannibal, so named because he had been known to feed on the carcasses of the dead dragons, and descended upon the hatcheries on Dragonstone to gore himself on the newborn hatchlings and eggs. Cold black, with baleful green eyes, the cannibal had made his lair on Dragonstone even before the coming of the Targaryens. Some small folk claim. Grandmaster Monk and Inception users both found this story most unlikely, as I do. However, would-be dragon tamers had made their attempts to ride him a dozen times, and his lair was littered with their bones. None of the dragon seeds were fool enough to disturb the cannibal. Any who did not return to tell the tale. Some sought the Grey Ghost, but could not find him, for he was ever an elusive creature. Sheepstealer proved easier to flesh out, but he remained a vicious and ill-tempered beast, who killed more seeds than the 3 castle dragons together. One who hoped to tame him, after the quest for Grey Ghost proved fruitless, was Alan of Hull. Sheepstealer would have none of him though. When he stumbled from the dragon's lair with his cloak of flame, only his brother's swift action saved his life. Seasmoke drove the wild dragon off as Adam used his cloak to beat out the flames. Alan Velaryon would carry the scars of the encounter on his back and legs for the rest of his life. Yet he counted himself fortunate, for he lived. For many of the other seeds and would-be dragon riders journey in it in Sheepstealer's belly. In the end, the brown dragon brought to heel by the cunning and persistence of a small brown girl of 6 and 10, who delivered him freshly slaughtered sheep every morning, until Sheepstealer learned to expect her, and even accept her. Munkin sets down the name of this unlikely dragon rider as Nettles. Mushroom tells us the girl was a bastard of uncertain birth, called Nettie, born to a Doxal whore. By any name, she was black-haired, brown-eyed, brown-skinned, skinny, foul-mouthed, and fearless, and the first and last rider of the Dragon Sheepstealer. Thus Prince Jaehaerys achieved his goal. For all the death and pain it caused, the widows it left behind, the burned men who would carry their scars until the day they died, 4 dragon riders were found. As 129 AC drew to a close, the prince prepared to fly on King's Landing. The day he chose for the attack was the first moon of the new year, yet the plans of men are not the plans of the gods. For even as Jace laid his plans, a new threat was coming from the east. The schemes of Otto Hightower had bore fruit. Meeting in Tyrosh, the High Council of the Triarchy had accepted his offer of alliance. 90 warships swept from the Stepstones under the banners of the 3 daughters, bending their oars from the gullet. And as chance, the gods would have it, the Pentoshi Call Gay abandoned, carrying 2 Targaryen princes sailed straight into their teeth. The escorts sent to protect the Cog were sunk or taken, the Gay abandoned captured. The tales reached Dragonstone only when Prince Aegon the Younger arrived, desperately clinging to the neck of his dragon Stormcloud. The boy was white with terror, shaking like a leaf and stinking of piss. Only 9, he had never flown before, and he would never fly again. For Stormcloud had been terribly wounded as he fled the Gay abandon, arriving with stubs of countless arrows embedded in his belly, and a scorpion bolt through his neck. He died within an hour, hissing as hot blood gushed black and smoking from his wounds. Aegon's younger brother, Prince Viserys, had no way of escaping the Cog. A clever boy, he hid his dragon's egg and changed into the rugged salt-stained clothing, pretending to be no more than a common ship boy. But one of the real ship boys betrayed him, and he was taken captive. It was a Tyroshi captain who first realized whom he had, Munkin writes. But the admiral of the fleet, Sir Rockall O'Hare of Lys, soon relieved him of his prize. The Lyseni admiral divided his fleet for the attack. One pincer was to enter the gullet south of Dragonstone, the other to the north. In the early hours of the 5th day of the 130th year since Aegon conquest, battle was joined. Sir Rockall's warships swept into the rising sun behind them. Hidden by the glare, they took many of Lord Velaryon's galleys unaware, ramming some and swarming aboard the others with ropes and grapnels. Leaving Dragonstone unmolested, the southern quadrant fell upon the source of Driftmark, landing men at Spicetown and sending fire ships into the harbors to set ablaze the ships coming out to meet them. By mid-morning, Spicetown was burning, while its Myrish and Tyroshi troops battled at the very doors of Hightide. When Prince Jaehaerys swept down upon a line of Lyseni gallons on Vermax, a rain of spears and arrows rose up to meet him. The sailors of the Triarchy had faced dragons before, while it's warring against Prince Daemon in the Stepstones. No man could fault their courage. They were prepared to meet Dragonflame with such weapons as they had. "Kill the rider and the dragon will depart," their captains and commanders had told them. One ship took fire, and then another. Still the men of the free cities fought on, until a shout rung out, and they looked up to see more winged shapes coming around the dragon mount and turning towards them. It is one thing to face a dragon, another to face 5. As Silverwing, Sheepstealer, Seasmoke, and Vermithor descended upon them, the men of the Triarchy felt their courage desert them. The line of the warships shattered, as one galley after another turned away.
The dragons felt like thunderbolts, spitting balls of fire, blue and orange and red and gold, each brighter than the next. Ship after ship burst asunder or was consumed by the flames. Screaming men leaped into the sea, shrouded in fire. Tall columns of black smoke rose up from the water. All seemed lost, and all was lost. Many different tales were told after of how and why the dragon fell. Some claimed a crossbowman put an iron bolt through its eye.
But this version seems rather suspiciously similar to the way Meraxus met his end long ago in Dorne.
Another account tells us that a sailor in the crossnet of a Mirish galley cast the grapnel as Vermax was swooping through the fleet. One of its prongs found purchase between two scales and was driven deep by the dragon's own considerable speed. The sailor had coiled his end of the chain, and the weight of the ship and the power of Vermax's wings tore a long, jagged gash in the dragon's belly. The dragon's shriek of rage was heard as far as Spicetown, even through the clamor of battle. His flight jerked to a violent end. Vermax went down smoking and screaming, clawing at the water. Survivors said he struggled to rise, only to clash headlong into a burning galley. Wood splintered, the mast came tumbling down, and the dragon thrashing became entangled in the rigging. When the ship heeled over and sank, Vermax sank with it. It is said Jacaerys Velaryon leaped free and clung to a piece of smoking wreckage for a few heartbeats, until some crossbowmen on the nearest Mirror ship began loosing quarrels at him. The prince was struck once, and then again. More and more Mirmen brought crossbows to bear. Finally one quarrel took him through the neck, and Jace was swallowed by the sea. The battle in the Gullet raged into the night, north and south of Dragonstone, and remains amongst the bloodiest sea battles in all of Westerosi history. Shirako Loar had taken a combined fleet of 90 Mirish, Lyseni, and Tyroshi warships from the Stepstones, and only 28 survived to limp home, all but 3 crewed by Lyseni. In the aftermath, the widows of Mir and Tyrosh accused the admiral of sending their fleets to destruction, whilst holding back his own, beginning the quarrel that would spell the end of the Trarchy only 2 years later, when the 3 cities turned against each other in the Daughters' War. Though the attackers bypassed Dragonstone, no doubt believing that the ancient Targaryen stronghold was too strong to assault, they exacted grievous toll on Driftmark. Spicetown was brutally sacked, and the bodies of the men, women, and children butchered in the streets, and left at fodder for the gulls and rats and crows, and its buildings burned. The town would never be rebuilt. Hightide was put to torch as well, and all the treasures the Sea Snake had brought back from his eastern voyage were consumed by the fire. His servants cut down as they tried to flee the flames. The Velaryon fleet lost almost a third of its strength. Thousands died, yet none of these losses were felt so deeply as that of Jacaerys Velaryon, Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Rhaenyra's youngest son seemed lost as well. In the confusion of battle, none of the survivors seemed quite certain of which ship Prince Viserys had been on. Men on both sides presumed him either dead, drowned, or burned or butchered. And though his brother Aegon the Younger had fled and lived, all the joy had gone out of the boy, for he could never forgive himself for leaping onto Stormcloud and abandoning his little brother to the enemy. It is written that when the Sea Snake was congratulated on his victory, the old man said, "If this is victory, I pray I never win another." Mushroom tells us there were 2 men on Dragonstone that night who drank to the slaughter in a smoky tavern beneath the castle, the Dragon Riders Hugh the Hammer and Ulf the White, who had flown Vermithor and Silverwing into battle and lived to boast about it. "We are knights now, truly," Hard Hugh declared, and Ulf laughed and said, "Fie on that, we should be lords." The girl Nettles did not share their celebrations. She had flown with the others, fought as bravely, burned and killed as they had, but her face was black with smoke and streaked with tears when she returned to Dragonstone. And Adam Velaryon, lately Adam of Hole, sought out the Sea Snake after the battle. What they spoke to each other, even Mushroom does not say. A fortnight later in the Reach, Orban Hightower found himself caught between 2 armies. Thaddeus Roman, Lord of the Golden Grove, and Tom Flowers, Bastard of the Bitterbridge, were bearing down on him from the northeast with a great host of mounted knights, while Sir Alan Beesbury and Lord Alan Tarley and Lord Omen Callstane had joined their power to cut off the retreat of Oldtown. When their host closed around him on the banks of the river Honeywine, attacking front and rear at once, Lord Hightower saw his lines crumble. Defeat seemed imminent, until a shadow swept across the battlefield, and a terrible roar resounded overhead, slicing through the sound of steel on steel. A dragon had come. The dragon was Tessarion, the Blue Queen, cobalt and copper. On her back rode the youngest of Queen Alicent's sons, Daeron Targaryen, now 15. Lord Ormond Squire, the same gentle and soft-spoken lad who had once been the milk brother to Prince Jacaerys. The arrival of Prince Daeron and his dragon reversed the tides of the battle, and not was Lord Ormond's men screaming the curses at their foes, whilst the Queen's men fled. By day's end, Lord Roman was retreating north, with the remnants of his host. Tom Flowers lay dead and burned among the reeds. The two Allens had been taken captive. Lord Costane was dying from a wound given to him by the bold John Roxon's Blackblade, the Orphan Maker. As wolves and ravens fed upon the bodies of the slain, Ormond Hightower feasted Prince Daeron on aurochs and strong wine, and dubbed him a knight with the stored Valyrian longsword Vigilance, naming him Sir Daeron the Daring. The prince modestly replied, "My lord is kind to say so, but the victory belongs to Caesarion." On Dragonstone, an air of despondence and defeat hung over the Black Court when the disaster of the Honeywand became known to them. Lord Bar Emmon went as far as to suggest that perhaps the time had come to bend the knee to King Aegon II. The queen would have none of it, however. Only the gods truly know the hearts of men and women as full as strange. Broken by the loss of her son, Rhaenyra Targaryen seemed to find new strength after the loss of her second. Jace's death hardened her, burning away her fears, leaving only anger and hatred. Still possessed of more dragons than her half-brother, her grace now resolved to use them. No matter the cost, she would rain down fire and death upon Aegon and all those who supported him. She told the Black Council she would rip her half-brother from the throne or die in the attempt.
Shortly after the Greens were deemed victorious at the Honeywand, Aemon One-Eye Targaryen, serving as regent and protector of the realm for his brother Aegon II, who's bedridden from his injuries at Rook's Rest, wanted to solidify their victories a little bit further. Contemptuous of his half-sister Rhaenyra, the protector of the realm saw an even greater threat in their uncle, the Prince Daemon, and the formidable host that he had gathered at Harrenhal. Summoning his bannermen and council, the prince announced his intent to bring the battle to his uncle and chastise the rebellious river lords. Prince Aemon proposed to strike from both east and west to force the lords of the Trident to fight on two fronts at once. Lord Jason Lannister would lead a formidable host and cross the Red Fork, while Sir Criston Cole would march from King's Landing accompanied by Prince Aemon and the formidable Vhagar. And if Daemon would oppose, Vhagar would surely overcome Caraxes, and Prince Aemon would return to the city with his uncle's head. All of the council did not favor the prince's plans, however. Grand Maester Oral urged the prince to send words to Storm's End to add the power of House Baratheon before proceeding. Lord Jasper suggested summoning the Lord of Hightower and his brother Prince Daeron and his dragon Tessarion, while his mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, suggested waiting for his brother to recover so he and Sunfire may join his cause. But Prince Aemon, however, had no taste for delays, and he also had no wish to share his glory with his brothers or any other man for that matter. A 16-day march to Harrenhal, he proclaimed, and on the 17th day, we will feast inside Black Heron's Hall while my uncle's head looks down from my spear, the prince is recalled to have said. But for his uncle Prince Daemon was too old and a seasoned battler to sit idly and let himself be penned up inside the walls of a castle, even walls as massive as Harrenhal's. For the prince still had friends in King's Landing. The word of his nephew's plan had reached him even before Aemon and his garrison had set out. When told that Aemon and Sir Criston Cole had left King's Landing, it is said that Prince Daemon laughed and said, pastime, for he long anticipated this moment. On the Red Fork, Lord Jason Lannister found himself facing the Lord of Pinkmaiden and the Lord of the Wayfarer's Rest, Tristan Vance. Though the Westermen outnumbered their foes, the Riverlords knew the ground rather well. Thrice the Lannisters tried the crossing, and thrice they were driven back. In the last attempt, Lord Jason was dealt a mortal wound at the hands of a grizzled squire. Pate of Longleaf, they called him. However, the fourth Lannister attack carried the fords. This time it was Lord Vance who fell, slain by Sir Adrian Tarbeck, who had taken command of the western host. Tarbeck and 100 picked knights stripped off their heavy armor and swam the river upstream of the battle, then circled about to take Lord Vance's line from the rear. The ranks of the River Lords shattered, and the western men came swarming across the Red Fork by the thousands. The Iron Lords had finally declared for his side, when their fleet fell upon the shores of the Lannisters' land, led by Dalton Greyjoy of Pike. Lord Mooten of Maidenpool was one of the many slain after he and a few men at arms attempted to put an end to the dragon Sunfire, who was recently ground-ridden after suffering a torn wing with his fight with Meleys, the Red Queen, above Rook's Rest. When Lord Mooten's body was found a fortnight later by his brother Manfred, nothing remained but charred flesh and melted armor crawling with maggots. However, the wounded dragon Sunfire was gone. It seemed that it had taken flight again, but no one could say where. Meanwhile, Prince Daemon Targaryen himself hasted south
on the back of his dragon Caraxes,
above the western shore of the God's Eye, far away from Sir Criston's line of march. And on Dragonstone, the Princess Rhaenyra suited up and took flight on the back of her dragon Syrax. Well above the city, the queen and her prince consort came together, circling over Aegon's high hill. Prince Aemon and his hand Sir Criston Cole had the new King's Landing of defenders when they set forth to retake Harrenhal. When the prince took Vhagar, the largest and oldest of the Targaryen dragons, that left only Dreamfire and a handful of half-grown hatchlings to oppose the queen's dragons. And since Dreamfire's rider, the sweet Queen Helaena, was a broken woman, the city had as well been dragonless. With both the Lord Protector and the King's Hand absent, and the King Aegon himself burned and bedridden and lost in poppy dreams, it fell to his mother, the Dowager Queen, to see for the city's defenses. Queen Alicent rose to the challenge, closing the gates of the castle and the city, sending gold cloaks to the walls and dispatching riders on swift horses to find her son Prince Aemon and bring him back. As well, she commanded Grandmaster Orwell to send ravens to all their Lear lords, summoning them to the defense of their true king. When Orwell hasted back to his chambers, however, he found 4 gold cloaks awaiting him. One man muffled his cries as the other beat and bound him. With the bag pulled over his head, the Grandmaster was escorted down to the black cells of the Red Keep. For all the strength the capital walls had, King's Landing fell in less than a day. One by one, dragons made their descent onto the capital. Sheepstealer lighted on top of Asenya's Hill, while Silverwing and Vermithor sat upon the Hill of Rhaenys. Prince Daemon circled the towers of the Red Keep numerous times before bringing Caraxes down. Only when he was certain the defenders would offer him no harm did he signal for his wife, the queen, to descend upon Syrax. Adam Velaryon remained aloof, flying sea smoke around the city walls. The beat of the dragon's wide leather wings sent a caution throughout the city, letting it be known that defiance would be met with fire. Upon seeing that resistance was hopeless, the Dowager Queen Alicent emerged from Maegor's Holdfast with her father Sir Otto Hightower, Sir Tywin Lannister, and Lord Jasper Wilde. Lord Lair Strong was not with them. The Master of Whispers somehow managed to disappear. It was said that Queen Alicent attempted to reason with her stepdaughter. "Let us summon a great council, as the old king did in the days of old," said the Dowager Queen, "and lay the matter of succession before the lords of the realm." But Queen Rhaenyra rejected the proposal with scorn. "Do you mistake me for mushrooms?" she said. "We both know how the council will rule." Then she bade her stepmother choose, yield or burn. Bowing her head in defeat, Queen Alicent surrendered the keys to the castle and ordered her knights and men-at-arms to lay down their swords. "The city is yours, princess," the queen is reported to have said, "but you will not hold it long. The rats play when the cat is gone, but my son Aemon will return with fire and blood." Rhaenyra's men found her sister, the Mad Queen Helaena, locked in her bedchambers. But when they broke down the door of the king's apartments, they discovered only an empty bed and his chamber pots full. The king's 2 surviving children, the Princess Jaehaera and the Prince Maelor, were also gone, along with Willis Fell and Rickon Thorne. The Queen Rhaenyra would not sleep until she claimed her father's seat, so torches were lit in the throne room, and the queen climbed the iron steps and seated herself, where King Viserys sat before her and the old king before him, as well as Maegor, Aenys, and Aegon the dragon in the days of old. Lords and ladies pleaded before the throne for her forgiveness and swore their lives and swords in honor to Rhaenyra as queen. It was well past dawn when Rhaenyra Targaryen rose before her descent, and as her lord husband Prince Daemon escorted her from the hall, cuts were seen upon her grace's legs and the palm of her left hand. Drops of blood fell to the floor as she went past, and wise men looked at one another, though none dared to speak the truth aloud. The Iron Throne had spurned her, and her days upon it would be few. And that concludes our complete history and lore for House of the Dragon Season 2. What's going on, guys? It's Mike here, the second son, formerly Quick Thought. So just briefly, really quickly, I changed the name just because when I thought of Quick Thought, I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do with the channel, right? And I always just freaking had a lot of quick thoughts in my head. No pun intended. I mean, actually all pun intended. What the fuck am I saying? You guys may not want to watch this portion around kids because I may swear a lot, so apologies on that. Can't help myself. So yeah, that's where the name came from, and this is the new name because, hey, quick fact, I am a second son. Most of my favorite characters in the Song of Ice and Fire and Blood are second sons. Most of my favorite kings of history happen to be second sons. Weirdly enough, right? So yeah, man, let's go with it. Also, this is going to be a completely raw discussion, meaning I'm not going to edit it. I just wanted to come to you guys and kind of discuss what I think both the Blacks and the Greens did completely wrong, or, you know, could have done better, and what I perceive is going to be in Season 2 of House of the Dragon. So, hell yeah, without further ado, my lords and ladies, let's hop into this raw discussion. Firstly, starting with the Blacks. So, the Blacks definitely took the Battle of the Burning Mill. House Bracken was forced to subtract so much of their strength from Stonehenge that Intel allowed Prince Daemon and Caraxes to swoop in for the taking, right? Which was just super sweet. But yo, shout out to Black Aly, right? Like, come on, man, Black Aly. Like, I really don't care if it was fact or just family legend, but just the symbolism that Black Aly supposedly sent a weirwood arrow straight through Amos Bracken's freaking skull. Just the symbolism behind that when their sigil is a weirwood tree and he got pierced with a weirwood arrow. Like, bro, like, That's my wife, bro. That is my wife. Shout out to Black Alley. And initially, Jacaerys looking for riders for the Wild Dragons was a strength, but it also turned out to be one of their biggest weaknesses. So yeah, there's that. Some of the biggest losses all in one came from one entity for the Blacks, and that's the Triarchy. Prince Daemon and Corlys Velaryon not successfully defeating the Triarchy led to so much destruction. So much for Team Black, right? Like, it literally led to the destruction of Spicetown, most of House Velaryon's wealth, and 2/3 of like their fleet, the death of the dragon Vermax and its rider, Prince Jacaerys Velaryon. So much loss came from that one entity. And if you want to sprinkle the icing on the cake, this is one of the first of many tragedies to happen to Aegon III. Like, he literally had to jump on his dragon Stormcloud and flee, like leave his little brother because there was no room. Like, and it was so bad that Aegon was freaking shaking like a leaf and stinking of piss. Like, it wasn't good. And on top of that, his brother was taken and didn't come back for years. Like, it was so bad. Like, the Battle of the Gullet was so bad for the Blacks. Like, and you guys know I'm completely a Green fan, right? But it was just a bad time. Like, it was one of the first of many tragedies for Aegon III, man. I feel so bad for Aegon III. Like, I feel so bad for that kid. And why don't we take a moment of silence for Stormcloud? Like, let's take a Stormcloud appreciation moment, right? Like, this dragon, this young dragon, literally had arrows in his belly and a scorpion bolt. You guys remember what a scorpion bolt is? This, I'll show you. A scorpion bolt through his freaking neck, but he still managed to carry Aegon III successfully to Dragonstone. Wow. Like, that's, bro, when I first read that years ago, whenever I first read it, it was nuts to me. I was like, what? Because we've heard of other dragons that don't even have that strength, that go down so fast, but something about that bond that Aegon III had with Stormcloud, and just that strength that he was so determined to make sure that Aegon III lived. That's heartfelt. Like, that's fucking heartfelt, man. And if you say not, you have no heart. You're cold-hearted. Right? Like, and Aegon III never flew again. It was just so bad. Like, the Battle of the Gullet was so bad. But let's move on. Also for the Blacks, I think it was a big mistake for Rhaenyra to not allow Jace and Joff to assist Rhaenys in Rook's Rest. Like, she could have potentially survived, came out injured. All of them probably would have just had minor injuries, you know, but she could have potentially survived. And it's even worse because they wanted to go and everyone knew that they wanted to go, which made Lord Corlys even more pissed off at her. So yeah, I definitely think that was a big mistake on Rhaenyra's part, right? To not allow Jace and Joff to assist Rhaenys to Rook's Rest. It definitely would have been better for them, and they could have kept a strong fighter and a large-ass dragon. And just briefly to add on, like, what's up with Rhaena? Like, the show depicted her like she was so upset that Aemon, quote-unquote, stole Vhagar from her, but yet she insists on walking around with dragon's eggs when there are 3 docile, large dragons for the taking. Silverwing, Seasmoke, and Vermithor. Like, come on. You let Hugh the Hammer and Ulf the White and freaking Adam Velaryon get these beautiful large dragons. Like, bro, like, I literally would have locked Rhaena in her chambers until she got some sense in her head, man. Like, seriously, bro. And moving on to the Greens, the same exact thing can be said about the sweet Helaena. Like, come on, bro. Like, listen, and I get it. I know she just lost a kid. I know her kid was murdered in front of her, and I also know that people deal with grief differently. But come the freak on, man. Like, we needed you. Like, don't get a dragon if you're not gonna use it. Like, and then Helaena had one of the largest dragons. Like, Dreamfire is top 5 largest dragons. Huge. And it was just thrown away. And mind you, like, the Greens had less dragons. They only had 4. Literally only 4 versus what? 12 or 13? Like, bro, come on, man. Like, come on. Like, oh my freaking god, man. It was freaking nuts. But yeah, man, like, I feel like that was more of any reason to jump on Dreamfire and literally shut shit down. You know, like Negan. Like, what if Negan had a dragon from Walking Dead? Like, but no, screw Negan. What if Tywin had a dragon? Worst thing that ever happened to Westeros. Honestly, probably not the worst thing. I still think Tywin would use his dragon very strategically. It's not like Joffrey or Ramsay, you know, having a dragon, you know, like something like that. I think Tywin would only fuck shit up when he absolutely had to, you know, or not even absolutely had to, or when he just needed to get his way or he needed to get shit done. Like Tywin was a man of getting shit done, right? But yeah, back on track here. Like, I just think Rhaena and Helaena wasted themselves during the war. I don't know, man. I think Rhaena's excuse was literally she was just afraid of war, but she's hiding behind the excuse that she doesn't have a dragon to participate when really she's shitting her pants. Something like that. But yeah, on to the Greens, man. Helaena was definitely a disappointment. She had one of the largest dragons and didn't use it. But nonetheless, to say the Greens had 3 dragons, I mean 3 in use, right? And they still did very well versus 13. That says a lot. Nonetheless, they needed to be more strategic with their dragons, in my opinion, and they just weren't. For example, at Rook's Rest, there's absolutely no reason why Sunfire and Aegon should have went in first against Meleys and Rhaenys. It just doesn't make sense. Sunfire is a young dragon. That's literally like sending a teenage boxer in against Floyd Mayweather. Like, you're gonna get destroyed, dude. Right? Like, why not send Floyd Mayweather, Meleys, against Muhammad Ali, Vhagar, right? Like, that's, come on, like, Muhammad Ali is gonna fuck him up, and if not, he's gonna be able to hold him off until, like, you know, reinforcements come in, which is like the teenage boxer, right? Like Sunfire. So they just were not strategic. Like, I think Vhagar should have went in first against Meleys and Rhaenys, and Sunfire and Aegon should have came in for the kill, right? And that just would have been better for the Greens overall, but they just weren't thinking strategically with the minimum amount of dragons that they had. Like they were just being reckless with their dragons, man. Like, you would have thought they had the 13 dragons, man. Like, you would have thought they had the dragons to blow, bro, right? Just, I don't know, man. I mean, to say they had literally, honestly, Aegon fought 1 battle with it, well, 2 if you consider it with Baela later on, but like Aegon's 1 brief battle really left them with 2 dragons throughout the war against all of the dragons that the Green had, because Helaena threw Dreamfire away. Aegon was injured after 1 battle at Rook's Rest, so it really just left Tessarion and Vhagar, Daeron and Aemon. And here's the thing about that, like, Daeron constantly gets overlooked. Daeron literally seems like he was listening to Tywin. What did Tywin say in Game of Thrones? Something about good kings listen to their counselors until they come of age. The smartest kings listen to their counselors long after that, or something of that nature. Daeron did just that, and it seems like Aemon did the opposite, right? Like, Daeron remained humble, and anytime Tessarion was needed, he swooped in. And it literally, like, I don't see why Daeron gets overlooked. Like, he's literally the smartest and won more battles than both of his brothers, right, on Tessarion. If we're keeping it real, like, if we're keeping it, like, 1,000, right? But Aemon seems like every chance the dude got, and I love Aemon, but it seems like every chance he got, he just disobeyed Cole, who's actually a seasoned soldier during the Dornish marches. He defeated Aemon's uncle twice during tourneys, but Aemon was just like, screw you, bro. Which honestly makes me believe, like, is there some more canon to the story that Mushroom says? Because if you guys don't know, supposedly Aemon and Alice Rivers and Christian Cole, Mushroom tells us that both of them were banging Alice Rivers, right? In a nutshell, right? So it's Aemon's just like, bro, like, you're screwing my girl, man, like, screw you. But he needs him close, like, he can't really do anything because he needs Cole. But rather than, you know, like, not have him as hand, he just doesn't listen to the guy. I don't know, man. It just makes me think what Mushroom said about that situation kind of has some type of canon to it. You guys let me know what you think. But yeah, Aemon was a big fuck up, man. Aemon literally, he was a big fuck up. If Aemon literally would have listened to Cole a lot of the times, even with the 2 dragons that they had, you know, and 2.5, I'll give Sunfire something because, you know, Sunfire did heal later on and try to do something just to get fuck up again by Moondancer. So, yeah, there's that, but I don't know, man. They weren't very strategic. Daeron was, but Aemon was not very strategic when it comes to Battle of War or using Vhagar. It's crazy because most things that Cole said came true. Like, Cole was right about everything, right? Like, you shouldn't let your half-sister's forces meet up at Harrenhal to join forces with Prince Daemon's guys. and take King's Landing. You know, King's Landing couldn't withstand with all those dragons. That's exactly what happened, right? Like, Cole knew what he was talking about, right? And on the other hand, you know, when Ormond Hightower called him his freaking kin, he was just like, no, Roman's not a problem. Like, bro, they're all a problem, bro. Like they're all a threat to your army and your dragon and your brother's throne, ultimately, right? Like, Aemon's cool, very thought out Targaryen, freaking badass, especially for his age, but when it comes to war, bro, his ego got in the way. Like, his ego was just too big, right? Yeah, man, somebody needs to talk to my boy, man. He needs to have a sit down with freaking Tywin. Tywin needs to give this kid some lessons on war and battle. I always go back to Tywin, man. Like, Tywin's just the shit. And one of the biggest missed opportunities for the Greens were definitely Otto Hightower's terms of allegiance with Dorne. Like, come on, bro. He sent some of the wackest and weakest terms of allegiance to Dorne. It was honestly disrespectful in my eyes, and I get why Corn Martell turned him down. He literally said, oh, you don't like this guy, so help us beat up the guy you don't like for free. Like, what? What? This is a principality. This is, in my opinion, the most respected and the superior kingdom on Westeros.
They were the only kingdom that was never conquered by Aegon the Conqueror.
Like, Dorne isn't one of the other 6 kingdoms of Westeros. This is still a principality. They're ruled by princes and princesses. So you need to send terms of allegiance with a prince or princess, right? Like, this is literally how Dorne came into the fold years later. The fact that Otto Hightower did not offer Daeron Targaryen's hand to Corn Martell's heir and daughter, Alandria Martell, was foolish and just a complete missed opportunity, bro. Like, a complete missed opportunity. Like, you can't even really say much more, right? Like, Daeron did not have a marriage pact at this point, nor did Alandria Martell. Like, so it just doesn't make sense. And then Alandria Martell,
especially being that Alandria Martell ends up marrying a fucking like Lysiti envoy, a guy who literally can't even hold a candle near her in terms of status and nobility.
named like Drasanko or Drasenko, or I can't think of the guy's name right now.
It's like, bro, you need a prince for a princess.
Honestly, if it was me rather than even Daeron, because he's a third son, the Baratheons were more willing to accept Lucerys if he was available. So I would have sent Daeron as a marriage pact to the Baratheons and Aemon as a marriage pact to Corn Martell for Alandria's hand in marriage, right? Just would have made so much more sense, and bringing Dorne in the fold would have definitely made up
For the damn Tyrells.
tucking their tail between their legs and freaking hiding in their castle and saying, oh, we don't want nothing to do with this. Freaking pansies. So, yeah, man, complete miss on the Greens. Like, they literally approached Dorne like they were some petty lords. Completely disrespectful, completely stupid on the Greens part. Yeah, I believe that's all I have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this over hour long history and lore and timeline of season 2 of House of the Dragon. Tell me what you guys think's gonna be in there, because you guys are probably wondering, like, how did you come up with this timeline? I literally just read the book. I did a reread of the book, and I was just like, hey, I think this is a good point where seasons 2 is going to start and where it's going to end. But honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, it wasn't until after I did my reread, and I was like, hey, this might be a lot of death for one season. So you guys let me know what you think. Do you guys think this is way too much death for one season? Because that's going to be blood and cheese to the death of Jaehaerys, Aegon's son, Rhaenys during Rook's Rest, and Jacaerys during the Battle of the Gullet. So I don't know if that's too much death for one season, but if you read the book Fire and Blood, those pages are super close. Like I said, Fire and Blood's super vague. It's not a lot of information, which means the writers are going to have to do like a lot of filler, right? They're going to have to fill in a lot of moments and come up with like a lot of dialogue. Also, what helped me come up with that timeline was based on George R. R. Martin saying that there's going to be 4 seasons. Like, there needs to be 4 seasons to tell the story of the Dance of Dragons well. So initially I was like, okay, that is a good place to start, right? I mean, that's a good place to stop. But it literally, like I said, I don't think it was until afterwards when I was like, that might be a lot of death for one season. Because I thought after Jacaerys they'll end with Rhaenyra taking King's Landing, but they might stretch it out into Rook's Rest being at the end and starting season 3 with the Battle of the Gullet, right? So you guys tell me what you think. Do you think it's gonna be Blood and Cheese at the beginning, and then they're going to stretch out Rook's Rest into the end? Or do you think it's going to start with Blood and Cheese, somewhere in like episode 4 or 5, we're going to have Rook's Rest, and then the season finale, like 9 and 10, is going to be the death of Jacaerys and Rhaenyra taking King's Landing. So you guys tell me what you think about that down below. And yeah, I think that's all I have for you guys. So once again, I hope you guys enjoy this history, lore, and timeline of Season 2 of House of the Dragon.
Well, my lords and ladies, we've been ranting about this for long enough, and the hour's getting late. As well as you all must get back to your families. But for the night is dark and full of terror, we must all look out for one another. My lords and ladies, this Green Council meeting is officially adjourned. I am your lord and lawful second son, and you all have a good night. I'll see you on my next one.